Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another in a series of SkySwitch webinars. My voice should be very familiar to all of you. I'm Andy Abramson, and I've had the good fortune to be able to host all these webinars the last year and a half or so, a little longer actually. Post vectors, we've changed everything up, and for many of you, well, a lot of these things are old hat, but just to give you a little background, we're going to have a great webinar today. We've got two of the SkySwitch team members who we're going to introduce or reintroduce to you. We're going to talk all about the SkySwitch services and features update today in our webinar. And we know that many of you have questions. So just remember, there's a Q&A tab inside the application. That's where your questions go. And we'll do our best to get to as many of them as possible in the time allotted. But the whole reason for this webinar is to update you on what's new in the area of features and services with SkySwitch. Our support and product development team has been continually working to make the SkySwitch UCaaS platform better, which ensures that you and your customers are working with the latest and greatest technology that we can offer you. That's why we're doing today's webinar. So we really want you to pay attention and listen in because we've got so much to tell you. I'm really happy to bring along today with me our new product director, Derek Hennekins, who you have not met, but Derek's got a deep background in telecom, in VoIP, in ISP, in MSP. He's built systems, he's run them, and now he's with us as our product director. So I'm really happy that Derek is here, and you guys are going to get to know him today, in the future, on special webinars that we're going to be doing just for the resellers about technology, like one next week about 10DLC. So if you have questions about 10DLC, wait a week because it's going to be a deeper dive with Derek, Corey, and Frank, and maybe others doing a private webinar just for you. We also are joined by a name and a face who's not at all unfamiliar to many of you. I'm talking about Senior Platform Engineer Jim DeVito. They're both here for an exclusive reseller-only webinar for you to tell you what's going on. So we're going to do a deep dive into all the latest features. You guys know Jim. You've seen him at Vectors. You've talked to him possibly at times. So Jim is going to really help us today, and Derek, tell you more about what's going on. We've got a lot to go over because a lot's been happening. Let's start off with multi-factor authentication, which is new to the portal PBX page. We've got text-to-speech with a new TTS engine for all greetings. We're going to add additional TLS support, which encrypts all of your SIP signaling. Reach UC, the improvements made to Reach UC's native applications, our PBX sites, so you can groups can users into sites and allow the site managers to manage more resources per site. Q Analytics, Teammate, lots of questions about the connector to Microsoft Teams. InFiat, our SD-WAN for encrypted voice traffic, and NMS and PBX updates, all the fixes, all the improvements, all the dual channel recording capabilities. So with that, I'm going to first turn this over to Jim DeVito, our Senior Platform Engineer, and let him tell you some of the things that are new and go deep into MFA right away. Jim, take it away.
Great. Thanks a lot, Andy. That was a great introduction there. So as you guys can see, the first slide here, this is one of the cooler features that we introduced recently is the multi-factor authentication, which at its core allows you to use the Google Authenticator app, which is a one-time use password app for both your Android and your iOS devices, in order to add an additional layer of security over to the portal login, the PBX portals anyway. So this can be enabled by the end user, basically. It can be enabled and disabled actually by the end user. As I said, it uses the Google Authenticator one-time password app, which adds just that extra layer of security so that you have to essentially go and get your code from your app in order to submit it into the portal. And you can see kind of a quick screenshot there of where you're entering your security code once you've entered your standard username and password. One of the cool things is that it can actually be enabled even if you are using the API, essentially, because the API has mechanisms by which it can come back and ask you for that one-time password that you can get from your Google Authenticator app. So if you're doing some development work and you're creating your own kind of integrations with the API and you have a user that has MFA enabled, that can fit seamlessly into your app as well. And we're actually working internally to add a lot of that MFA API integration with some of our other applications across the platform, which some of them include the SMS responder and even some of the voice broadcast features that we have. So that's kind of the high
Yeah, we have
level.
a question. We actually have a question from Corey Mankiewicz. Sorry to jump in. He wants to know if you're going to integrate with Duo for two-factor authentication.
We don't have any plans to do that at the moment. Right now, we're just using the Google Authenticator app. However, we can certainly look into other two-factor, other MFA applications should we get the request to do so.
Great.
That's kind of a high level, documentation there. The MFA documentation itself is linked in this slide deck, and it is all available in our publicly facing knowledge base. So you guys can feel free to peruse that. And again, if you have any questions on the MFA feature, go ahead and add that to the Q&A.
MFA is so important when you think about it's not just security, but it's really about trust. It's about making sure that the right people are having access and control. And more of the entire entire connected world is moving towards different versions of two-factor authentication. And I don't believe any longer that it even should be a maybe. It needs to happen in order to keep things locked down, because hackers work 24/7, and unfortunately, some of us do have to sleep now and then. So we tend to forget all that. Text to speech has been something which has been growing more and more, and obviously people are able to use it in place of having a recording for things like their IVR. What have we been doing with text to speech, Jim?
Well, text to speech is actually one of the cooler features that we have. I think it's one of the cooler things that we've worked on and released in the last few months. And basically, it's actually really nice because the text to speech, the modern day text to speech engines produce very natural sounding voices. They sound very good. And so what we do here is we allow you to use the text to speech feature in any place that you would normally have a greeting. You can use it for your recorded names you can see here. You can use it for your voicemail greetings. You can use it for your auto attendant greetings and your auto attendant menus. So you can use it any place that you can use a greeting. We have both the Google WaveNet and the IBM Watson text to speech engines enabled. And so actually what you'll see now is part of our newest API and portal code release, we actually are tagging the different voices with the text-to-speech engine that they come with that is producing those voices. So you can kind of play around and test the different voices and see which ones you like the best. But I will say they are pretty good, actually. And so far we have English, French, and Spanish, including French Canadian, in case we have some French Canadian partners on today. And so real quick, I wanted to just kind of mention how it worked behind the scenes, because it might not be super clear how it's happening. But when you submit one of these forms that allows you to type in your message in order for it to be translated from text to speech, it actually makes a request to our API, which brokers the request between the different text to speech engines, whether that be Google or Watson. And then what happens is we get back a WAV file of that speech that was converted from your text into, and then we'll use that as we would any other greeting, basically. And that that can, like I said, can be used for your voicemail greetings, your recorded names, your auto attendants. That kind of stuff is all there. And I would definitely encourage you to play around with it if you haven't been doing it. I've actually heard from a number of partners who said it was something that they've been looking for a while, and it's working out really well for them and their end users. So go ahead and check that out. I definitely encourage you to try some of the different voices and see which ones you like, and obviously, provide us any feedback in that realm. We also have the text-to-speech feature fully documented in our publicly facing knowledge base. So you can see there kind of a even more deep dive than just these little screenshots about exactly where you can apply the text-to-speech function. But in general, you can use it anywhere that you would use a normal greeting that you would either record or upload into the PBX portal.
It's as simple as just typing what you want to say and then picking the voice you want to use and then saying when you want it to run. And what's great about this is you can have different messages at different times of day, and you can have different voices delivering it. So you may start with the first voice, which is Allison, and on the initial prompt, and then it says press 1, 2, or 3, and 1, 2, or 3 could have a different voice for each. It's all whatever you want to do and whatever languages you want to do. And the fact that we're working with both WaveNet and Watson gives people plenty of choices. Is on the roadmap to update where people can actually upload their own voice if they wanted to?
That is currently not available. We're using the stock voices that come with the different TTS engines. However, those engines are constantly evolving. And so we do get the latest updates because we make all these requests in real time. So as those different engines add voices, and as we get requests to add language support, we're certainly going to be doing that.
Great. Why don't we roll into TLS? Now, TLS is something that, if people don't understand it, it plays a key role in security, but also it's something which can be very pesky with certain cable operators that tend to block TLS as part of thinking it's their firewall, and then you have to turn things off. So why don't we talk about all the things we're doing with TLS, Jim?
Yeah, so we recently rolled out TLS support. So that's transport layer security. It's essentially a way to encrypt traffic between two endpoints, utilizing the public key infrastructure. And we've rolled that out across the call processing platform, specifically so that we can encrypt your signaling information that comes from your phones, your SIP trunks, your other devices, that then connect into our call processing platform. The TLS support makes it really nice, actually. One of the main drivers that I've seen for partners adopting TLS as it pertains to how they encrypt the signaling between their devices and our call processing platform is actually a lot of people are having trouble with different ALGs, buggy SIP ALGs on different routers and firewalls. And so the TLS kind of bypasses a lot of that, because essentially the ALG is not able to match that as SIP traffic. And so you're not going to have a lot of the problems that you have sometimes on some buggier, routers, modems, firewalls, and stuff like that. So in order to set up TLS support, there are some SRV records that need to be created for your partner account specifically, and we can do that for you. So that's just a simple request to support, and we can get that ball rolling. And then it's actually really easy because we have all the documentation on our site that has that'll tell you exactly which overrides to apply to your devices. So you can turn on TLS on a per device basis. You can turn it on on a per domain basis, and have all your devices connecting over an encrypted channel to our call processing platform. So that's kind of how it's enabled. The real cool thing is that it is RTP site compatible because it's actually using our private keys to encrypt the traffic. RTP site is able to decode and understand that traffic. And so you don't lose any of the functionality of being able to take a deep dive into call signaling or call quality metrics because RTP site is able to handle that. So that's really nice. We do actually, it is not officially supported feature. However, we do have SRTP available. SRTP would be the similar concept to the TLS for encrypting the signaling, but it's actually going to be encrypting the media stream between your device and our call processing platform. It is, again, not an officially supported option at the moment, but it does work. I've not had any problems in a lot of the testing that we've done. And so that is another option if you'd like to have a little bit of extra encryption between your communications, between your devices, your SIP trunks, and our call processing platform. The only limitation, I put limitation on here because it kind of relates to the RTP site compatibility. In order for RTP site to be able to decode this encrypted signaling traffic, it actually needs to see the entire SSL handshake, essentially, which means that it has to be able to see the whole setup of the TLS session, which on a lot of phones doesn't happen every single time you make a phone call. It happens once every hour or whatever those TTLs end up being. So you occasionally might run into an issue where where RTP site has just missed the setup of the TLS session. And so it's not able to decrypt that traffic. And most of the time you can literally just reboot the phone and it will it'll renegotiate the TLS session, RTP site will see it, and then it will be able to decrypt all the traffic going forward. So that's kind of where TLS support is. We're pretty happy about that. It is definitely growing in our platform. There are more and more partners who are enabling TLS on their devices. I'm seeing that every day. So it's definitely an important feature if you want to have that little bit of extra security, or you just want to be able to get around some buggy SIP ALGs that happen. And again, all that is documented on our publicly facing knowledge base. So the link is referenced here for everybody to go take a look at.
That's great. I think TLS is something that everybody just needs to learn and understand more about. And Jim, obviously, if people have questions, they can always just come to you directly and ask you questions about that, whether they're here in the webinar or in the future, right?
Of course, absolutely.
Okay, let's move into something which I know a lot of our resellers have been asking. When is something going to happen with Reach UC? When are you going to make changes to Reach UC? When is Reach UC going to be this, that, or another thing? Can you give everybody an update on what's happening with Reach UC?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we did is we kind of embarked on a major overhaul of the Reach UC infrastructure over the last few months. And that overhaul was to basically do two things. It was to help improve the audio quality that people experience when using the Reach UC infrastructure. And it was also to bring on the native apps for both Windows and Mac OS, which are different than the WebRTC apps that some people might have been using. So one of the things that we did when we were trying to improve the quality is that we looked at all of the call quality data across the Reach UC infrastructure, and we decided that a lot of the calls were actually negotiating in libc, which is a different codec basically. And so we modified that codec order so that you're getting more high quality codecs in your first offer and subsequent answers when you're using the Reach UC infrastructure, which helps to make the voice a little more full bodied. I believe it's actually using Opus now as the first codec that, the first wideband codec anyway, that it's negotiating. We also have, there's transcoders involved, which transcode one codec to another so that the call can traverse our entire call processing infrastructure. And we've actually moved those onto physical hardware because we noticed that there might have been some delay in the virtualized environment. So we moved those transcoders to physical hardware. And I think we've made lots of improvements in the audio quality as far as when you're using the Reach UC apps. Specifically to the Windows native app. So now, instead of the WebRTC version, which was using the WebSockets behind the scenes that you couldn't see, we have the native apps now, which are actually much more like SIP soft phones that would be on your computer. And so you're actually getting the real SIP signaling coming right from your device, whether it be your Windows device or your Mac OS. So that actually makes it a lot easier to troubleshoot because you're able to see that signaling. And all of that is kind of just as you would see it and troubleshoot it with any other phone or device. That's kind of the advantage that the native apps bring to you. Specifically for the Windows native app, there was an issue, and this is kind of a big change. There was an issue in which call recordings actually did not have the best quality with the Windows native app. And that the actual call itself was fine, but due to some different buffers in the way that the call recording application actually records and transcodes calls, there was some recording quality issues when the recordings were viewed in the PBX portal. So actually, the very latest release of all the Windows native app and the Mac OS app, which I believe just happened last week, early last week, does have that fix in there. So if you haven't upgraded to the native apps yet, I certainly advise you to try them out and let us know what you think on that thing. But the native apps are definitely a good addition to the Reach UC infrastructure to kind of more emulate what you would have as a physical desk phone, essentially. The other thing,
Jim, with the Mac OS major update yesterday for security, have we been able to test against it? Because I know in the past, one of the things Apple has a bad habit of doing is breaking SIP when they do these fast patches. And it's happened for many, many years, going back to the early 2000s on Mac OS, not so much on iOS. But have we been able to test against that recent patch, which is a major security update that they forced out just yesterday?
Absolutely. It's on the roadmap here to test. We're going to have, we actually have a pretty dedicated testing infrastructure for the Reach UC apps before they get compiled and released to the public. So I can't say that we've had a chance to test that exact feature release that Apple did yesterday, but it's definitely, that gets all of that stuff gets rolled into the testing plan that we have for these apps before they.
Right. So everybody will know that, because the security update they did yesterday, they made a big deal of, because it was some type of ability to literally hack into your computer without you even knowing it, and not without dropping any code or anything. And it was, Apple made a big deal just late yesterday, and they pushed this out within 7 days when they found out about the exploits. So hopefully you and the team that are working on it are able to quickly test that, because we don't want anybody to have a bad experience.
Absolutely, for sure. And then just the final thing there was actually the fact that we've added the Outlook add-in. So if you're using Outlook, and actually it's coming to Outlook 365 as well. If you're not using just the native Outlook app, that's actually currently in development and testing. But the Outlook add-on basically just adds the ability for it to, for the Reach UC add-on to scan your email, pick out phone numbers, and allow you to click on them and make your call to those phone numbers right there from the Reach UC app, whatever app you may be using.
That's great.
Yep, that's kind of a new thing we got there.
Yeah, Jim, that's really good, because click to call has been a function of regular Outlook since the dawn of time, since we were able to integrate click to call. But now, with everything going to Office 365 in the cloud, this makes it easier for someone who's either migrated from or has never used the original Outlook to simply have the same behavior. So that's a really good addition. And Reach UC is the desktop apps complement how people work these days. And quite honestly, more and more people are moving towards soft phones. So we're really happy and excited to have the Reach UC clients out there that work natively. Native apps always, especially on Windows machines where there's so many hooks and that have to be taken advantage of, it will really work better, and your customers will have a better experience. Let's move over to Derek and talk a little bit. Derek, first, welcome to SkySwitch.
Thanks, Andy. I'm
so
glad
happy
to be here.
You're here. We're really glad you're here. And everybody, Derek has only been here a few months, so please in the Q&A, be rough on him and beat him up. No, seriously, be gentle, and let's give him a chance to really get his feet wet. He's been diving under the hood. He's been really, the expression of a good product director is that their heads down more than their heads up when they first get there. And he's been exploring and looking at, and he's been one of you. He's run ISPs, he's developed VoIP systems, he's very familiar with the SkySwitch platform, which is one of the reasons why he joined us. And from a selfish standpoint, I'm really glad you're there, because this means we can have fun telling everybody about all the great things that SkySwitch is doing, and we can do it together. So why don't you talk a little bit about some of the other updates that we've done, starting with the PBX sites?
Sure, thanks. So PBX sites was released just this summer. The intention of the sites is to have a dedicated site manager manage devices, or not devices, users, conference bridges, your auto attendance queues, music on hold, that type of thing, on a per site level. This reduces the amount of work that the office manager has to do, and you can kind of distribute that workload out. The couple of things with the site manager is when you're editing some of the users, you don't have the same level of rights to make changes to it as the office manager. It's more along the lines of auto attendant recordings, greetings, things like that, or call queues, making sure a device is in there, or so on and so forth. The profile itself cannot change the role of other users. The only role that can create the site manager is going to be the reseller role. So your office manager is also unable to create that site or that site manager. A couple of things that it does is going to be time zones, area codes. For 7-digit dialing, you prepend the area code, your caller ID, 911, and dial permissions. The nice thing about that is when you're creating a user, again, this is for creation of users, not post creation. You can override some of the settings and automatically have them become part of a different time zone or so on and so forth. Some of the use case scenarios for this would be single domain, multiple sites. I had a domain that had 6 different offices, 4 different states, 3 different time zones, things like that. Sites would have been super, super helpful in creating a lot of those users. Again, this is not at the site or the device level. And the other limitation on here is it does not do timeframes or telephone numbers. So for timeframes, you'll want to create a dedicated timeframe for that site, and then just have separate timeframes per your routing users. And then the last thing is it does not have call center features. The site manager just does user features, conference bridge, again, those same types of things. This is fully documented and it is available for everybody today. I noticed that there are a couple of resellers that have reached out and asked questions about it. And so not everybody's aware of it.
This is great because what it really feels like is you're able to do more personalization by group or by location that previously didn't exist. So anything that adds to greater flexibility and usability from where I've always sat looking at the voice over IP market, Derek, is we're making it more robust and at the same time simplifying how people can manage their day-to-day operations of a particular account.
Absolutely.
Talk about Q analytics. Q analytics is something that plays into analysis of calls coming in, time on hold. It really helps the person in the call center environment supervise their team by saying who's talking too much or who's not answering calls quickly enough, or all the different things that you need to see if you're a call center manager. What have we added?
So the Q Analytics, or AKA our wallboard, is a feature that I've been waiting to see for quite a long time. It is nice to be able to have up on the screen on the wall, statistics on how many queues or calls are in queue, how many agents are online, that type of thing. You can do notifications and thresholds. So if you are wondering, hey, how many calls are on right now holding, you might say if it's 5 calls, turn it red if you hit a 6th call, and want to make sure we're adding agents or so on and so forth to that. So all the stats you want, basically one view. On here on the screen, you can see that there's different types. There's the gauge, the line graphs, the tables, grids. Bottom of there is going to be notes. So if you want to just put a note up on the screen for the week that said, hey, we had this many tickets sold last week, or this is what's coming up, or this is what's being released, you can put it in the notes. The bottom right there is just an iframe. So that is something that if you wanted to pull in a different website with something that was scrolling as well, you could also inject that as in the same thing. You can do filters. So each one of these graphs and cards basically have a filter option. So if you can see, I've filtered basically on all the support queues here. So you can filter on sites, departments, queues, and agents. And so if you're looking for a specific department versus a specific site, you can do that. You can create multiple wallboards, dashboards themselves. You can favoritize them, and then basically you can share them as well. So you can share them from your extension, basically the call center supervisor, to create them and share them out to everybody in the organization, as well as create a publicly shareable URL. So if you have one of those wall boards where it auto boots up, logs in, pulls up a web page, you can pop that URL in there and it'll stay live and function for you as you set it up. The last thing I got on there is that's actually what I did. Got it all set up. You can do browser notifications is the last one as well. So you can utilize the notifications through the browser.
Those are really super additions because it's giving our resellers the ability to compete. It's giving them the ability to say, yes, we can do this now, not, oh, we don't have that yet, or it's coming. These are great competitive advantages when a reseller is talking to somebody about setting up call center functionality and being able to manage the call center. So good job on adding these things that obviously are a long time coming. Another area which is high in demand is what we're doing with Microsoft Teams and our teammate connector that we had Micah talk on back, I want to say back in April or May, when we first brought this to market after a good testing period. Teams is becoming a major part of everybody's daily workflow. And we're doing things to keep making Teams more interoperable with the SkySwitch platform. So you as a reseller are able to successfully compete and not lose business. So why don't we talk about some of the updates that have been going on with Teammate and our Teams connector?
Sure. So Teammate's been around for a little longer than a couple of the other features. I've used it in the past, and it works really well. Kind of like ReachUC, Teams is the only other application that I've seen that does forking properly. So you can use the same username and password on your mobile device as you can on a PC or Mac. And it will simultaneously ring to both of those devices, unlike some soft phones out there. A couple of the key features of this is, in a remote world like we are in lately today, there's no need for physical hardware necessarily. So if a new customer is coming on and they already have Teams, it's pretty easy to just tie into that. One of the big things is it's quicker training, right? So they're already familiar with the app. They know how to use Teams, how to navigate through it, and so on and so forth. The only thing that you're adding and training on is going to be the calling feature. So along with, there is in the app itself, when it installs, is going to be the PBX portal. So once you authenticate and create, you can use the Teams app to make and take calls. You can chat internally, do whatever you need to do that Teams does, as well as make the changes to your user on the PBX portal right within Teams. And one of the nice things about this is, if you're not a Microsoft shop by default, or you're not an expert in Microsoft, this brings a lot of the call flow and the call management and the call troubleshooting all to the PBX and takes it away from the Microsoft side. Now, that's not saying there's not going to be Microsoft issues, because obviously they're making and taking changes all the time. They're updating their stuff as well. So Teammate will make sure that they're updating and continuing to improve along with Microsoft. Another thing that we have coming up in the future that I really don't have on the roadmap here is the CTI, the call integrator that we have today, is eventually going to be replaced, and we will be able to push presence into Teammate, so that when you're on a call on a physical phone, that you'll see that presence inside of Teammate. So that's kind of coming up in the future here. For the use cases, the things that I look for when I want to sell Teammate to a client is, are they already using security with Microsoft? So if that's the case, they're probably already on an E5 license and they already have that phone feature. So that's pretty easy, no extra cost at that point. However, you can just add the call feature license and then push them through to the PBX. Some things do take time. So when you set it up the first time, things take time to sink in. So like Microsoft might take 24 hours to actually do a full setup. The setup's actually pretty straightforward and easy. Management's really easy. Device creation's automatic. It's very nice. The best part is all the errors and logs are all in this PBX. Now it's stuck somewhere in Microsoft land. So that's pretty much the thing. If you want to get more in depth, there is a full webinar, hour-long, on Teammate on our YouTube website.
Really helpful, and it's great to see that no one at SkySwitch is sitting still on just what we're doing with Teams interaction, interoperability. By making all these changes and updates, we're staying current with what Microsoft is doing as well. And I think that's really important, because almost every couple of weeks you hear about something new and something different with Teams. Our team is staying abreast of that. So Derek, I know that with you there and with Jim and with Corey, we're staying on top of it, because we're also using Teams internally. So that's helpful for the whole, as part of the whole BCM1 relationship. We're using Teams, and so it's not like we're strangers to it. A few months back, we had Infiat on our webinar talking all about their SD-WAN and how failover works so well and everything else that they're doing. You want to give us a quick update on what's new with our SD-WAN integration with Infiat?
Sure. So I've spent a little bit of time with Fareed and going through the Infiat solutions, and it is actually a pretty slick little solution. There is a little gateway you can put out. It's all available in the store today. Basically, it's AI driven. It is an application and protocol aware. So whether or not you're making a call from Teams on your PC or a physical phone like a Yealink, it's going to take that protocol and push that into the overlay and send all the traffic, including the audio traffic, all through the overlay, encrypted to a hub in one of our data centers. Now, all of our data centers are equipped with hubs, so your your domain will actually be set up for primary and secondary for your failover. It does bandwidth shaping. So obviously, if you have a bunch of VoIP traffic and it pulls up a bunch of your bandwidth, it's going to manage your bandwidth going out. It does have seamless failover, and your failover to a secondary ISP, or you can bring your own LTE, whether that be a USB LTE or a SIM card, depending on which flavor of box you get. And then it can work on a single connection. So if you think you're always on a primary connection anyway, so if you don't have a secondary, it's still encrypting, it's still doing what it does, it's still traffic shaping, it's still doing all those things. On their roadmap, they do have IDS and IPS coming. I don't have exactly when that's coming, but it is on its way. One thing I really like about the Infiat is it does have a web proxy. So you can access remote phones behind a device utilizing that little web proxy. Right now we have 100 meg and 1 gig models. And the other thing to note is it can connect to multiple different hubs. So if you have IT as a service or IaaS basically in your own data centers, you can set up your own hub and have an Infiat connect to SkySwitch for voice traffic and then connect to you for your data traffic. They are right now in the middle of a Windows 10 Pro only software version with all the same features as the actual physical device. And it will be configured and deployed with the same type of licensing and the same function as you would a physical device. And again, the whole webinar is out there. It's a really neat application and product. Check out the webinar. And if you have questions, let us know. We can do demos.
It's great that we're able to work so well with a company like Infiat, Silicon Valley-based company, a lot of really smart people who are looking at SD-WAN in very different ways. There's a lot of SD-WAN companies out there, but one of the reasons why the SkySwitch team chose Infiat was first because of its compatibility with the SkySwitch platform, but second, they have a vision of where SD-WAN traffic needs to go and how it needs to be managed and how well it works with voice over IP. So that was a big reason why we deployed Infiat. And if you haven't had a chance to check out the webinar that Derek spoke about, tune into that. And then if you have more questions, get in touch with SkySwitch. We're more than happy to help you make a good decision on SD-WAN. There's a lot of other things though going on, Derek and Jim. What are some of the other feature updates and changes that we have coming down the pike?
We got a bunch of other things. I'll let Jim take over the first of the feature update changes with Yealink and Telco, and then I'll get to the some of the pieces of the roadmap after he's gotten through there. Jim?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Derek. Kind of run through these things here. And so one of the things that we also did recently, and there would have been a notification that went out about this, is that we kind of changed the way that we're managing Yealink firmware. Which actually makes it very easy for the partner to now choose the version of Yealink firmware that they would like to run on a per device, a per domain, or even a per partner basis. And those are all configurable as overrides in the NDP device provisioning infrastructure, which I'm sure most of you guys are familiar with. So it's basically just a real easy way to manage the different firmware versions. I believe we have V85 through V86, although I do believe V86 is still experimental. But yes, it is a much faster, easier way to manage Yealink firmware versioning, which is not something that we had before, basically. So that was really kind of a cool change that might have flown a little bit under the radar, but there would have been an announcement about that one. Our telco portal, we had some updates in our telco portal as it pertains to provisioning phone numbers. The search is now better. You can search for phone numbers based on the last 4 digits. You can search for sequential numbers that you'd like to purchase if you wanted to get them in a sequential order. We also allow you now to configure your SMS on numbers that you're porting in so that they'll be ready to go once they get ported. And we also fixed a couple of issues with the way that it routes phone numbers basically after you've purchased them or ported them in. So there's some changes there, but they're generally all for the better. And actually, one of the cool features that actually just got released and rolled out across our call recording platform, which is the platform that records calls so that you can see the call recordings in the PBX portal. We've enabled new stereo recording, so dual channel recording in the PBX portal for that recording there. And the reason that we did that is because a lot of partners are wanting to use third-party services that do sentiment analysis on recorded calls and use different AI functions to help them modify their conversations, help them sell stuff better, help them answer customers' questions better. And a lot of these third-party services require higher quality dual channel recordings so that they can more accurately, pick between the different speakers. So that was rolled out last month, I believe, across the entire recording infrastructure. So everything that you see, all your call recordings that you see in the PBX portal now should be of the new higher quality dual channel type. So that's actually a really, really cool thing. If you guys haven't noticed that was happening, there was an announcement that went out about it, but it is really cool if you didn't notice that those recordings have changed. The other thing
That's really cool, Jim. Jim, that's really cool because it actually adds to fidelity and makes it easier to channel separation for people who are listening to the recording. They're able to then tell who's talking.
Exactly. Yes. And one thing I forgot to mention is that, right now you can use these higher quality dual channel recordings with the third-party call sentiment analysis services. However, SkySwitch probably towards the end of this year, early next year, is going to be offering our own integrated call sentiment analysis product. So be on the lookout for more updates around that.
That's great. More functionality, and what this means, especially with what you're about to talk about with things like web and video conferencing, what this means is a richer service offering and another reason why resellers can compete against other brands that are out there. Like, all these changes are making SkySwitch not only the leader of the pack, but very, very useful for you to defend your business as a reseller. These features are all coming out, and it's a credit to Jim and Derek and Corey and Blake and the whole SkySwitch team that we're not sitting back just saying, okay, here's our service and simply maintaining it. We're changing it, and we're changing it for you as a reseller so you have a better competitive story to tell. Why don't we talk a little bit about the roadmap?
Yeah, absolutely. So the one thing on the roadmap, and this might actually be the first time that we've kind of publicly talked about it, but for a few months now, we've been working on what we call Dash Manager 2.0, which is a complete from the ground up rewrite of the partner dashboard application. And that's cool for a couple of reasons. One is that it's actually been completely written, as I said, from the ground up using modern frameworks, and we have some very high quality development resources that have recently actually been brought on with SkySwitch. And now we're going to be able to make lots of very quick and interesting changes to the reseller or to the partner dashboard so that we can bring new features to you very quickly, essentially. Right off the bat, and I should say we're probably, I would say about a month away, maybe a little bit more from putting that out for a public beta so that you guys can see the actual, the new Dash Manager portal. And one of the cool things is that we originally designed it to look very similar to the current partner portal and have all the same functionality. And we did that because we didn't want it to be a huge transition, essentially, for all of our partner base here. So in its initial launch, it's going to look and feel and have all the same functionality that the original partner dashboard has, but we now have it built on a solid modern framework that we can quickly add and make changes to, and hopefully bring some new features to everybody in that realm. So the last thing I'll talk about is the web and video conferencing. We're actually have been working for a while now, and this is out in beta. I believe some of you have even been using it. We're trying to work out all the last of the bugs here, but we're moving away from our original video conferencing platform, and we're moving towards a more integrated platform, which is going to give us a lot more deeper integration and a much more modern feature set, which again will help you compete with some of the more modern video conferencing solutions. So that's currently in beta. I'm sure some of you have used it already. And like I said, we're just trying to work out the last bit of the bugs there. And then we'll be all set to roll out some new web and video conferencing stuff. So then I will.
That's great.
Yeah.
So much interest in that. And it's a long time coming. So I encourage all of our resellers, jump into the beta. Don't wait. Just like many of you we're in the Teammates technology team connector beta. It really helps us deliver a better product for you, but it also gives you as a reseller greater understanding of just the features and functionality of what the collaboration platform will offer. So when do you think we can open the beta up?
I believe we're actually already allowing partners to test the beta. I'm not 100% sure on what that process is. I'd have to.
I can add some color to that real quick, Jim. So there are documentation and written up so that if you wanted to turn on the web conferencing, go out to our docs, search the web conferencing, and then follow the instructions. It's basically just reseller level added into your domain, and then it enables a URL at the end of your PBX dot whatever URL, and then you can test it, and it follows the same username and password as your user. So make sure you enable your roles, and you're good to go.
Great. Sounds excellent.
I'll get to jump into the last one here. So SMS platform. We've had, I'd say, a need for a different kind of communications with SMS, and we've got two things coming down the pipes right now. One, we've talked about a little bit, the 10DLC. You've seen a lot of the messages coming out. It comes out daily. A lot of changes are happening there. So I'm not going to dive into the 10DLC very deep, or really at all, just because we have a dedicated webinar next week. But just know that the 10DLC is changing the way we communicate via messaging. The FCC apparently determined that messaging is not something that they're going to determine as telecommunications. It's more of like a data transfer. So the mobile network operators all got together with the campaign registry, created the rules, policies, and all the things, and basically became a gateway for it. So with that, we're focusing 100% right now on 10DLC, making sure we're getting there. You'll be able to submit in your campaign requests and things like that to get started. There's some deadlines there, so make sure you read the documentation on that. But SMS platform, so we're basically going to call it our cloud message platform. It is coming. It's basically getting ready to be put into beta coming soon. Again, it'll come on the heels of the 10DLC completion. From this platform, you can basically send messages, conversational. You can send some campaigns. A couple of campaign types are going to be like a drip message. So you want to ping somebody so many minutes, hours, days, whatever, and send multiple messages until they respond. Give them bits of information more and more each time, or just kind of keep pestering with the drip campaign. You can send blast messages, so you'll be able to bring in contacts and then create lists, send out a message. There are some fields that you can utilize, so like first name, last name, that type of thing, so it becomes a little more personal. And then there's also reminders. The way it's going to be rolled out is going to be fairly basic, just with those features. Once we have everything up and running, then we're going to start taking feature requests and then transforming it into a little more advanced type of basically being able to share, transfer, that type of stuff with messages. But for now, we will be able to share telephone numbers and be able to respond on other telephone number conversations. So that's up and coming. So keep an eye out for that. That's about that.
Okay.
Andy?
That's all these. Derek, you guys have been busy. You guys have been really, really busy. And I have to commend you. And you've only been here, what, 3 months? But what a change. This is great. Thank you so much to you and Jim and the entire team that makes it happen. I really can't say thank you enough on behalf of all the resellers and behalf of the whole team at SkySwitch. We're going to open it up to some Q&A. And just a reminder, please put your questions in the Q&A. Some people are putting them in the chat. We'll try and get to the people in the chat, but we like to follow the rules. So let's go through some of these questions we have here and comments also. There was a comment earlier about Duo, Jim DeVito. James Laval says it does work with Duo. I just tested it and it was successful for me. So that's a really good thing to know. He also said, will Dash Manager be configured to also use two-factor authentication via the Google Authenticator?
Yes, actually. In fact, that's part of the new, that's actually a very interesting idea. That's part of the new Dashboard 2.0. There's a lot deeper integration with two-factor authentication. It was prior to, the current partner dashboard has some limitations there, but yes, we will be interfacing two-factor authentication here as well.
And Joe Missio was asking a question about changing language. saying he didn't see how you can change the language. I guess he was talking about the PBX sites discussion. You want to just reiterate just how easy it is to change languages and all that in the setup?
Per the sites, yeah, it should be in there actually when you're creating a site, although I probably haven't looked at it in a minute, but it should be there. Let me double check real quick.
He also wants to know if you have to type in the language you want.
No, there should be a drop down that has the supported languages.
On another question from Rob Cofield, is the DNS SRV record required per domain or for the full reseller domains?
That is actually applied at the reseller level. So every reseller, every partner nowadays has a essentially a UDP SRV record. So when you request of support to enable TLS for your reseller, your partner account, we go ahead and we just create a secondary DNS record, which you can, use or not use based on the overrides that you set in the device provisioning system.
Richard Roth wanted to know how you can edit an existing text-to-speech message. So what I think he's asking, Jim and Derek, is they've already set it up, it's already running, it's already programmed in, and they want to change it. Do they have to delete it and put a new one in, or can they just go in and edit the old one?
Yeah, that's a great question, Richard. This is actually a pretty common one that we get. And basically there is no mechanism for editing the message now because, and that's kind of why I explained a little bit how it works, that when you make the request to create the text-to-speech greeting, it actually goes to our API, which then brokers it to the different text-to-speech engines. And what we get back is actually just a WAV file of the greeting, like you would if you uploaded a greeting or you recorded one through your phone. So it's the exact same process, basically, at the display layer of the greeting. So there is no concept of retaining what the message is. It would be just like it's a greeting that you uploaded. You would have to just go and listen to it in order to figure out what it says. And then if you wanted to, modify it, you would just retype out the whole message.
Another comment was from Dale Morgan. He's saying it was a great selling point for the HIPAA 2. I think he's talking all about probably some of our encryption. I'm not sure because there's no reference to which of the many different great new features we're rolling out. But you want to talk a little bit about some of the HIPAA compliant features that we've added, or how we support HIPAA compliance through some of the features we've added?
Yeah, I'd imagine there's a lot to do with the TLS in there as well. You're essentially encrypting the signaling of the call so that becomes hidden, essentially, which would have some of your identifiable information in it. It would have your phone to and from phone numbers and everything. A lot of the HIPAA support that we have now is around audit logging, and that can all be seen in the portal. There are features. There is the ability to turn on HIPAA compliance for a domain. That's all in our publicly facing documentation. And there's a few different things that does, but most of it's around audit logging, essentially.
That's right. What about ringtone volume issues on ReachUC's native app being resolved? This comes from John Camello. He also wants to know, when is video calling being added back to the native app? And this is all about ReachUC.
Yeah, absolutely. So with the ringtone volume issue, I am actually personally not familiar with that one. However, I'm going to make a note to get familiar with it and figure out where we stand and how that is happening. And as far as the video calling getting added back into the native apps, that is still on the roadmap. I don't have a super exact date on that one, but a little hint, we are actually working on the next generation of ReachUC, which is going to take a while, but that is definitely on the roadmap too. So I'll have to get some clarification there.
Adam Keelan wants to know.
Sorry.
That's great, Derek. That's cool. Adam Keelan wants to know, you guys were talking about the Outlook plugin that we've now got, which is, which makes it easy for Click to Call on the laptop and desktop versions. But the question is there any plans to put the Outlook add-on on mobile?
Not that I have, no, not at the moment, actually. That very well could be something that we look into if we get the interest, but it's not something that we have right now.
A lot of that also has to do probably with the APIs that are available from either the iOS, the Apple APIs for iOS or the Google Android APIs that are available for apps that go in the Play Store. Some of this stuff is outside of our control and isn't something that you can just do. And then because, Reach UC is a very involved app, it's a question of just what you can do when before you get app bloat or functionalities that cause other things to break. So when it becomes available, I'm sure our team will look at how to make it possible. David Boyd welcomes Derek, says you're a great addition to the team, says Sites is amazing. However, MOH is not working properly for Sites. Do you have a time frame for resolution? He's already filed a trouble ticket.
Yeah, so actually, I would advise you to go ahead and retest that because that issue, I believe, was fixed in the most recent release of our portal and API code, which just got wrapped up, I believe, Monday.
See, we're on top of everything. You guys are great. I mean, this is amazing. I'm listening. Yep, we've got this done. Guys, resellers, you've got great resources in Jim and Derek and Corey and the support team, but you've also got a great resource in our FAQs and our knowledge base. And a lot of these things are constantly being updated. I see the updates that come through in our Slack chats, and I'm amazed at the velocity and how fast we're doing things. So don't forget, you can always also check our Dash Manager and our FAQs and our knowledge base. Al Fahimi wants to know if he needs to have Microsoft Business license for voice for teammates to work.
Derek, I'll let you.
So the licensing you can use, as long as it has the phone add-on piece in the licensing, you will be able to connect to it. So if it's like an E1 or E3 or F1 or F3, you're going to have to add on that. I believe the business one does come with the calling plan. Otherwise, the E5 includes the calling, the phone edition license as well. And so you just want to double check it. So one of the nice things about the Teammate Technology portal is it automatically identifies whether or not the license that the user has assigned to them is phone compatible or not. So if you have, say, a few that E5s for testing or whatever, you can assign those and then test it out, and then you'll have a list where you can add on. But you should be able to add them on to anything besides the E5.
Mark Wasser wants to know if there's any plans to expand the ACD contact center functions, multimedia, omni-channel, skills-based. What do we have planned?
Well, what I will say is that there are big changes coming to the call center, big improvements, in my opinion, coming to the call center, the entire call center platform, basically. Very soon. We're working on a next iteration of that software and getting it up and running, and hopefully getting people to take a look at it soon. I can't say that I have the exact list of all the improvements off the top of my head, but there are probably in the next, I'd say, month to 2 months, we're going to be rolling out some very new and improved call center functionality that'll hopefully resolve a lot of questions around reporting and some stuff like that. So yeah, new call center stuff is coming. I'm sure we're going to have something to talk about that pretty soon here.
This question from Robert Harney actually probably plays right into what you're just talking about, Jim. Will we have a call transcription functionality?
Yeah, so currently we do the voicemail transcription. I can't say that I know of the call transcription being on the roadmap, but again, it's one of those things where if we get a lot of interest, it's something we can certainly look at.
Another question from Daniel Stuckey. Will the collaboration web conferencing and video conferencing plan allow full screen on the shared screen? It says you can go full screen, but the view is still windowed.
Yeah, so that's exactly why it's in this beta state now is for stuff like that. So if you haven't, I would say open a support ticket on that one so that we know that's something that needs to get looked into.
Yeah, I've been testing and doing a lot of tracking of a lot of different things on there. There are a few bugs. There are some things that don't quite do what we needed to do, and there's some features that we need to add in as well. We will be taking that entire list of features and bugs and all of the requests and submitting that basically all at once. One thing we want to do is get all of the biggest picture pieces fixed right away versus having a trail of continuous feature requests or bugs where it doesn't take as much of their focus. So feel free to submit tickets, whatever. We will be tracking those and submitting those all at one shot.
Anthony Camello asked another question. For the video conferencing, will there be a feature enabling you to conduct remote sessions?
Yeah, so currently there's two different ways to use the video conferencing. The first one is just your standard video conference where you have everybody on the screen, and then the second one is actually more like what we're doing today, where there's a panelists. It's actually called, I believe, the webinar feature. You can set up a webinar type conference, and in that case, you have something like what Zoom does today with the panelists and the attendees separation there. If that's what the question was.
I think that is what the question is, because unless he's talking about being able to do remote servicing where you can actually take control of somebody else's computer, might be another way of interpreting that question.
That's not on the roadmap now, but it's an interesting idea. I understand that concept for sure.
eBay Ninan asks, will the current video conferencing platform be completely eliminated and replaced by the new platform?
The goal, yes, is
guess
to
that-
eventually replace the platform.
Will there be a webinar about 10DLC specifically? Yes, if Brian McConnell asked that question, yes, Brian, there's going to be a private, and you'll be notified through the usual communication channels from the SkySwitch team next week, where we're going to do a very deep discussion about 10DLC, and I'll just leave it at that, because any of these questions about 10DLC likely will be answered in the call next week with Frank and Derek and Corey and Jim, if you can be there just in case. I think you have a lot to add. There's any other questions that we get about 10DLC in today's webinar. I'm just going to park them until next week. Are there any plans to allow mobile apps to be completely white labeled with a partner logo?
So that has definitely been discussed for the next iteration of the ReachUC mobile platform. I believe you actually can white label the platform now, but you end up with a separate app release basically in the app stores. So I'll have to see about that, but I'm pretty sure you can do that now. I'm not 100% sure that it uses your logo in the app itself. But yes, there is some at least white labeling there, and there's more in talks for the next iteration of the mobile platform.
John Camello asks, will a function be added to ReachUC to update software without needing to remove the old version and replace with new? Now, I'm assuming he's talking about the desktop version, desktop laptop version, and not the mobile version, because pretty much all mobile versions just automatically update the way he's asking the question. But can you give some insight to that, Jim?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, I do understand the uninstall and reinstall process is a little cumbersome there. We are tracking a couple of different issues around there, specifically as it relates to the uninstall process and the install process, where we don't need to be installing the VCC redistribute all the time. So yes, we are tracking some issues there, and hopefully the next production release of the Windows desktop app will have some improvements around uninstalling and reinstalling.
Speaking of improvements, Toby Hardwick wants to know any improvements on the night key function.
Not that I'm aware of. Yeah, I'm not super familiar with any improvements there.
Okay, Dawn Bush wants to tell everybody that according to CISA, single factor authentication is on the list of bad practices. So thank you, Dawn, for sharing that. We really appreciate that. Joel Peoples, why does sites have a field for the dial translation? The guidance from support has always been to match the site dial plan to the domain. Is there a reason that field has so many other options, or not just fixed to the domain setting?
Yeah, that actually is something that we're aware of. We have the yes, basically it should just default to the domain setting. So that's actually kind of, I believe that's actually already an issue we're tracking, to not give you all those other options essentially, because they're not. The guidance from support is correct there.
We have a question. When is the next version of the soft switched V42 coming out? which fixes API related to call queues with second calls ringing after patching a call, which would busy out the agent until the patch call is ended.
Yeah, so I can't say I'm familiar with that particular issue, although I may have come across it worded differently. Yeah, we are looking, actually today we did, right before this call, we did some preliminary work to start building the infrastructure so that we can take the new version there. And so hopefully it's kind of a long road to take on a new version like that, because it's such a big part of the platform. So we are very much beginning the process to make sure that we can take that on and do it in a timely fashion.
That's really helpful. We have a question from Joseph Misio. How is TLS enabled? Is it a reseller customer site or user function?
Yeah, so it's a reseller SRV record that covers any device in the reseller domain. And then the reseller actually has to go into the NDP infrastructure and configure it either on a device, domain, or even reseller level in the device provisioning system. And that's all documented on the TLS document in our publicly facing knowledge base.
Brian McConnell was asking about our Slack channels. That's an internal Slack discussion, Brian, that we share internally with the team. So everybody at Control Tower, everybody in the SkySwitch offices around the country, especially some of us who are working remote, we're able to see what's going on. That's not a public thing. So sorry. I was just mentioning how we internally see so much of what's happening and are able to stay abreast of it. And maybe at some point we want to create our own reseller Slack group, and I'll talk to Jason about that, because that might be a useful way of communicating more quickly. Let's talk about vectors, says Anthony Goss. When is pricing coming out? Any cool events happening? Anthony, as the executive producer of Vectors, I can tell you, yes, pricing is already out. We've got our website published, which is SkySwitch Vectors 2022. You should be able to purchase your registration soon. We've got some special offers right now. Erica will have put something out in the most recent newsletter about Vectors. Pricing is on par with where we were before. We encourage everybody to book early because pricing does go up in different chunks. I think October 1st, the price will go up from $395 to $495, and then it goes up again in January. We've got some special pricing for guests. A lot's being planned. We're really excited about Vectors 2022, long time coming. Same location, Low Sapphires Resort in Orlando, where we were in 2019. Starting on Sunday, March 27th, is when we're going to have new resellers day, where resellers who've joined recently between, say, October and March get to come in and meet some of the SkySwitch team and get oriented. Monday, Tuesday, we go at it really hard. And if you're a Club 1000 member, we've got some special activities on Wednesday. We're packing it in to Sunday, Monday, Tuesday for a lot of reasons, mostly because we know that time is more valuable now because of the pandemic, and that people have to maximize their time where they are in this travel. So we're looking forward to a great, 3 days with you. And then if you're a Club 1000 member, which means you have 1000 lines with SkySwitch and you're part of the Club 1000, which every reseller should aspire to be a part of. I think we're somewhere around 60 resellers, up from about 33 last time it's at Vectors. We hope to have 70 or 75, but hey, we might have 100. We're going to do some special things for you on Wednesday. So that's what's going on with Vectors, and we hope every one of you comes and brings a couple people. We've got the space. It's going to be a lot of fun. Those of you who were there in 2019 will tell you how much fun it was and how great of an event it was. So great time to ask that question, Anthony. Thank you. Michael Dinkins says, clarification of my question is for the TLS functionality within the portal. Why won't you store the text for future changes?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So it's kind of actually just how the feature works, in the sense that it sends the request to the API, and the API brokers that between the different TTS engines. we actually don't even have the text. Basically, we're not storing the text anywhere. That's not to say that we can't in the future, but it isn't really something that you could edit anyway, because you're really just working with WAV files like you are any other greeting. So editing the text would essentially just recreate a brand new request and generate a completely new WAV file. So yes, currently we are not actually storing the text that gets put in there anyway. It's a real-time creation of the audio, but it's not to say it's something we couldn't look into in the future.
Another question comes from Robert Harney. Why ReachQC and not the native platform from the soft switch?
Basically, because it allows us to control the release cycle, and we're able to bring you quicker features, newer features, and quicker bug fixes, basically. And it's all primarily about being able to control the release cycle. Also, the native vendor's app was actually not as full-fledged when we actually started creating ReachUC, because we wanted to be able to provide that particular mobile functionality before even the vendor had it. So lots of new stuff coming in the ReachUC land. We're also bringing on some additional development resources to try to make that pipeline a little better. And so, yeah, lots of good stuff there, but primarily it's so that we can control the development lifecycle.
Sean Ivester says, we're in the beta version of video conferencing testing right now. When it's complete and released, will we be able to add a dial-in phone number on the invitation?
Yes, and in fact, the only reason you're not able to do that now in the beta is because that's a bug that we have to fix.
At least we admit our mistakes, right?
That's why we do the beta, so that we can get all this stuff in and make sure that we have a pretty solid platform when it comes time to release.
Anthony Camello says, thank you. He was referring to remote servicing within the video conferencing feature. So Anthony, we're happy we're able to give you clarity, and that was a great question. Dale Morgan says, is there any reason to not just go full out TLS?
Not particularly, no. I mean, generally it is a change to the way partners operate today. So generally, I think people are a little adverse to just making blanket changes like that. But no, there isn't necessarily any downside to doing so.
Mark Wasser asks, is there any update for the fax ATA availability? Mark, it's a funny thing you ask. In our Friday edition of the monthly that went out just this past Friday, Kelly Osborne, who runs the SkySwitch store, had Erica put in some information about the fax ATA. So I'd first refer you to look at that. There is a day-to-day availability. Contact Kelly using the store@skyswitch.com email address, and she can answer your questions directly. It's changing almost every minute, as is a lot of things in the supply chain. So work with Kelly. She's got her hands wrapped around that problem personally, and should be able to help you at least with clarity. Joseph Missio says, so submitting a request for TLS will not affect existing users or sites. I would probably guess to say that's correct. Am I right, Jim?
That is correct. Yeah, there's a very small caveat where there's like a handful of devices that when they see the TLS SRV record will move over, but those are almost always like one-off door phone things. So I'd say 99.9% of the time, enabling TLS will not affect existing users until you go and actually modify those configuration parameters on the device provisioning system.
George McCutcheon wants to know, and I hope I got your name right, McCurchin, it looks like. When will you send out the webinar invite for the A to P 10DLC internal webinar? Derek, is that going out today or tomorrow to everybody? Because we wanted to get through today's webinar and not confuse anybody. Is that what's going on?
I believe so. I'll follow up with Erica, but yeah, you can probably expect it within the next day or so.
Great. Daniel Stuckey, save it in the description, include the name you recorded with. I have done this trick a few times and it helps a ton. Daniel, I have no idea what you're talking about, which particular function, but it sounds like the right idea. And then Bob Bascom says, store it in text in a description field. So that takes care of the questions that were there. And then I'll go to the ones in the chat if we have a few minutes left to see if there's any questions that really can be answered here. Any idea when the function to help with SIP ALG issues will be rolled out and officially supported? That one comes from Anthony Camillo.
To make use of TLS encryption to overcome SIP ALG. So yeah, I mean, that's basically what the, that's one of the functions of the TLS essentially. So if you're having troubles with a troublesome ALG at a customer's site, whether it be the router, the modem, a lot of times it's the charter modem, stuff like that. Yeah, enabling TLS may be an option for you to try to get around those issues.
And then Tim Delph was asking about issues dialing site to site. I imagine that that's got to do with PBX sites. Can it still be an extension number without site access number?
Yes, I'm actually not necessarily aware of any issues dialing between sites. It should actually be you should be able to actually just dial extensions. If that's not the case, that's something we certainly have to look into, but you should be able to just dial extension to extension.
And then Corey Barrett wants to know how he can get into the beta for the web conferencing service.
That process is, I think Derek had some documentation about that in our knowledge base. I'm not 100% true.
It's out on the it's out on the public facing knowledge base for sure. So go out and look for that and just follow the steps. It's fairly easy to turn on. So.
And then Corey, as Kristen Hunt says, is the web video conference going to be an extra cost?
That is not something I have information on. Derek, do you know about that one, or?
I'm not 100% sure. Most add-on features do have a cost, but I don't have an answer for that right now.
And then, yes, there will be a specific to Brian McConnell. There will be a webinar all about this once we get ready to go commercial with it and it's productized. Right now, it's in the beta. Please, if you have questions, comments about the video conferencing service, either talk to your SkySwitch sales representative, talk to Jason, or email Derek or Corey or Jim your specific questions. This has been great, and I really want to thank Derek and Jim for sticking around. It's 17 minutes after the hour. We normally wrap these things up, but we really think that you guys have a lot of important questions. I'm going to quickly go back to the Q&A and see if there's anything that we haven't addressed other than questions about 10DLC, and it looks like not. We've done a great job in getting through all the questions as quickly as we did. I want to thank Jim and Derek and of course Erica for all the effort they put in to make this webinar happen. We've been wanting to bring these new features to you in a complete, concise, clear way so that you have a full 360-degree understanding. We know that there's always going to be more questions. We know that, like with all technology and all software and all platforms, things are evolving. It's not a perfect world. Bring your questions, your comments, yes, even your complaints to us, and let us work with you to resolve the issues as quickly as you can. Derek's team, Jim's team, Corey's team do a bang-up job at addressing your needs as fast as they can. Blake on the platform side works night and day to keep things up and running with his team. And of course, the control tower that you all interact with on a regular basis is there to support you. So with that, I want to thank Erica for doing such a great job at prepping and getting everybody ready. We thank you for tuning in. The webinar will be published probably tomorrow. We'll upload it and there'll be information sent to you for your participation. Thank you again. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Derek. Thank you, Erica. And everybody, most of all, thank you, our resellers, for really being part of the SkySwitch team.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.